Vilnius. And of course, who was there but Zelensky? And he was glad-handing with everybody, Rishi Sunak, but also the German Chancellor here and a number of other people. Of course he was. But he wasn't terribly excited about the final communique or what was coming out, because this is what he had to say about it. It's unprecedented and absurd when a time frame is not set for Ukraine joining NATO, neither for the invitation nor for Ukraine's membership. And he went on to say, I believe that NATO, in a NATO that doesn't hesitate, doesn't waste time, and doesn't look back at an aggressor. And of course, he's absolutely dying to be for Ukraine to be a formal member of NATO so that Article 5 can be triggered. But that wasn't all that was going on at Vilnius. There were also agreements with respect to Asia, because of course the NATO 2030 policy is to expand into Asia. And so Stoltenberg agreed and signed an agreement with South Korea here. Nearly said North Korea. That would have been quite an incredible situation. No, South Korea, and also Japan. Japan is also going to be signing what's being described as an individual tailored partnership plan with NATO. This is all about tightening relationships with the alliance. So let's have a picture of them all getting together, all the Asian axis here for Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and South Korea. Well, this hasn't gone down so well with everybody. So this is a report in Pearls and Irritations. NATO's provocative lurch eastward, and the supreme fool Jens Stoltenberg. This is by Paul Keating, the former Australian Prime Minister. So let's just look at what he's saying here. NATO's continued existence after and at the end of the Cold War has already denied peaceful unity to the broader Europe, the promise of which the end of the Cold War held open. And besides, the Europeans have been fighting each other for the better part of 300 years, including giving the rest of us 2 world wars in the last 100. He went on to say, exporting that malicious poison to Asia would be akin to Asia welcoming the plague upon itself. With all of Asia's recent development amid its long and latent poverty, that promise would be compromised by having anything to do with the militarism of Europe, and militarism egged on by the United States. And he said, all the people on the international stage, the supreme fool among them is Jens Stoltenberg, the current Secretary General of NATO. In February, he was drawing parallels between Russia's assault on Ukraine and China, saying we should not make the same mistake with China. That China should be superintended by the West and strategically circumscribed. Stoltenberg, in his jaundiced view, overlooks the fact that China represents 20% of humanity and now possesses the largest economy in the world and has no record of attacking other states, unlike the United States, whose bidding Stoltenberg is happy to do. So, Alex, very briefly, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that it's dawning on Asia watchers that China is in a different league to Russia. Now, Georg and I differ in views on many things, including Russia's role in the Ukraine war, but I think both of us would see eye to eye on this, that you don't take on China in the same way that you take on Russia. And this at a time when Western think pieces in defense journals in Washington are calling for Stoltenberg to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, that would be about right. But let's bring RUSI on screen then, because this is their attitude with respect to the cluster bombs issue. Giving Ukraine cluster munitions is necessary, legal, and morally justified. So they're saying, in summary, therefore, the objections to cluster bomb provision in Ukraine are militarily dangerous, legally misleading, and morally questionable, drawing a false equivalence between Russian and Ukrainian use cases. The use of such weapons by the armed forces of Ukraine on their own territory, at their own discretion, against fortifications in open countryside and against hostile forces who routinely fire Soviet-era cluster munitions and other highly unreliable munitions into civilian cities would therefore be consistent with the principles of proportionality and discrimination. They go on to say that cluster munition provision will not only increase Ukrainian military effectiveness against dug-in Russian forces, but will also help alleviate Ukrainian and wider NATO ammunition shortfalls and barrel constraints. That's quite an admission. Since Russia's current strategy relies on outlasting Western military support capacity, improving the sustainability of Ukraine's artillery capabilities would also increase the incentive for Russia to end the conflict. Therefore, the US is justified in providing Ukraine with cluster munitions to help liberate its territory, which is the only assured means of restoring the right of Ukraine's civilian population to live in peace. Quick thoughts on that as well, I think we need from you, Alex and Gevorg.
Cluster munitions for peace. It's pretty Orwellian stuff. For those who missed the background, the White House has green-lighted the supply of these banned weapons to the Ukrainian armed forces. The British government has not resigned from its previous position that that's contrary to international humanitarian law. Gevorg, 30 seconds from you, because among your other duties, you are now an accredited chaplain to the armed forces of Ukraine. You see horrible injuries and the effects on families. Although you take the Ukrainians' position here, what do you think about the West supplying these dreadful munitions?
Well, I'll say the following: we cannot justify murders and killings, and we cannot justify war. But when there's a war going on, and when there's an invading force that is Russia, that has all the supplies and everything, and has no moral limits to what it does, and Ukraine being the weaker side, reliant on all sorts of aid that's coming from the West, I think that it is justified that Ukraine will recourse to all the resources possible to secure and protect their people, because genocides genocides in the smaller scale sense, massacres, like what happened in Irpin, Bucha, and other places, Kharkiv and Melitopol, those should be prevented. And the only way to prevent the Russians from committing them again is to drive them out of the Ukrainian territory. That's my position, and made no secret ever.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Now, let's change topics then.